Cassandra Merrill had folded her husband's laundry for 16 years, and she knew every single shirt he owned. That was why her hands stopped moving on that quiet Saturday morning, hovering over a brand-new pair of running shoes sitting by the front door. Shoes she had never seen before. Shoes her husband had bought without saying a single word. In 16 years of marriage, Gregory had never once bought anything for himself without mentioning it at least 3 times before and after. She stood there in the hallway of their 2-story house, a basket of warm towels balanced against her hip, staring at those shoes the way a person stares at a piece of furniture that has been moved 2 inches to the left. Nothing was wrong exactly, and yet something was different. And different was not a word that belonged in the Merrill household. Their life together ran on a rhythm so steady you could set a clock by it. Gregory woke at 6:45 every weekday morning, kissed her on the temple while she poured his coffee, and left for the office at 7:30. He worked as a software developer at a mid-sized technology company downtown, where he spent 9 hours a day in front of glowing screens, writing code and drinking more coffee than any doctor would ever approve of. He came home at 6:15 in the evening, sometimes 6:30 if traffic was heavy on the interstate. He would drop his bag by the stairs, loosen his shoulders with a dramatic groan, and say some version of the same joke he had been telling for a decade, that the only cardio he ever did was sprinting for the bus that one time in 2019, and that he was still recovering from it. Cassandra loved that joke. Not because it was funny, it had stopped being funny somewhere around the 100th telling, but because it was his, predictable, warm, a little worn at the edges, like the flannel robe he refused to throw away. Gregory was 48 years old, carried an extra 30 pounds that had arrived slowly over years of desk work and late-night snacks, and he wore all of it with the cheerful surrender of a man who had made peace with himself. He was not vain. He was not restless. He was, in every way that mattered to her, a man without secrets. So when he came down the stairs that Saturday morning wearing gym shorts she didn't recognize and picked up those mysterious new shoes, Cassandra set down the laundry basket and simply watched him. "New shoes?" she asked, keeping her voice light. Gregory glanced up, and there it was, a flicker of something across his face, quick as a shadow. Not guilt, exactly. More like a man who had rehearsed an answer and was annoyed at being asked the question earlier than planned. "Oh, yeah." He turned the shoe over in his hands, as if seeing it for the first time himself. "I've been thinking, you know, I sit all day. Every day. Figured I'd start moving a little after work, just to boost my mood, get the blood flowing." She smiled, because it was a good thing. It was, objectively, a wonderful thing. How many wives spent years begging their husbands to take a walk, to eat a vegetable, to see a doctor more than once a decade? And here was hers, voluntarily, at nearly 50 years old, lacing up a pair of running shoes on a Saturday morning. "That's great, honey," she said, and she meant it. "Where are you going? I could come with you. We could walk the trail by the reservoir." No, it's fine." The answer came out a half-second too fast, and he seemed to hear it himself, because he softened it with a laugh. "You'd just watch me embarrass myself. Let me get past the dying whale phase first, okay? Then we'll talk." He kissed her on the temple, the same kiss as always, and went out the door. Cassandra stood at the front window and watched him stretch awkwardly on the driveway for a minute before actually jogging, down the street, his new shoes flashing white against the gray pavement. She laughed a little to herself, shook her head, and went back to the towels. That should have been the end of it. A husband deciding to get healthy. A small, Good change in a life full of comfortable sameness. But the following Monday, Gregory didn't come home at 6:15. Cassandra had dinner ready at 6:30, the way she always did. Roasted chicken that night, with the rosemary from the little pot she kept on the kitchen windowsill. 6:30 came and went. 6:45. She checked her phone. Nothing. At 7 o'clock she finally texted him, keeping it casual, asking if traffic was bad. His reply came 4 minutes later. Went to the gym after work. Home by 8. Sorry, should have said something. The gym. He had joined a gym. Not the trail by the reservoir, not a stroll around the block. An actual gym, with a membership and everything. And she was learning about it through a text message at 7 in the evening while his chicken went cold under aluminum foil. When he walked in at 8:15, his hair was damp from a shower, and he was carrying a gym bag she had also never seen before. But it was his face that caught her attention and held it. Gregory looked light. There was a brightness around his eyes, a looseness in his shoulders, a small private smile still fading from his lips, as if he were returning from somewhere that had done him good, in a way he wasn't ready to explain. "Sorry about dinner," he said, kissing her temple. He smelled like unfamiliar soap. "I should have texted earlier. It won't happen again. I mean, the not telling you part. The gym part is going to happen a lot, actually. I'm committing this time. For real." "Since when do you have a gym membership?" "Since last week." He was already moving toward the kitchen, lifting the foil off his plate, cheerful and hungry, and completely unbothered. "There's a place 10 minutes from the office. A bunch of guys from work go. It's nothing fancy." Cassandra sat across from him while he ate his cold chicken, and told her about his day. The same way he always did. A bug in the payment system, a co-worker named Marcus, who microwaved fish in the break room again. The ordinary music of their ordinary life. She listened, nodded, laughed in the right places. And underneath the table her hands were quietly folded together, and she couldn't have explained to anyone why. Because nothing was wrong. She repeated that to herself while she washed the dishes that night, while the sound of the shower ran upstairs. Nothing was wrong. A man had joined a gym. Millions of men join gyms. It was the most harmless sentence in the English language. My husband goes to the gym after work. And yet, it wasn't the gym that bothered her, she realized, lying awake at 11 that night while Gregory slept peacefully beside her, one arm thrown over his face, the way he had slept for 16 years. It was the silence around it. The shoes bought without a word. The membership purchased a week before she heard about it. The rehearsed little speech about boosting his mood. Gregory narrated his entire life to her. Every headache, every sandwich, every minor triumph at work. The man announced it when he found a good parking spot, and this whole new corner of his life he had built quietly, deliberately, behind a closed door, and she had only found out because dinner went cold. She turned onto her side and looked at his sleeping face in the dark, the face she knew better than her own. "You're being ridiculous," she told herself, and she almost believed it. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, gym days. He would text her now, at least, a quick message around 5:30. Heading to the gym, home by 8. He came home each time with damp hair and that same lightness in his face, that glow of a man freshly returned from something good. He started refusing second helpings at dinner. He bought a water bottle the size of a fire extinguisher. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror one Sunday morning, turned sideways, and patted his stomach with an expression she couldn't read from the doorway. Not vanity, exactly. Something more serious. Something almost like determination, or maybe worry, gone from his face the instant he noticed her reflection behind him. "Looking good? Handsome?" she said. "Getting there," he answered and smiled, and the moment passed. Her mother had given her a saying once, years ago, over coffee in her sunny yellow kitchen. "A happy man hums, but a man with a secret sings quietly to himself." Cassandra had laughed at it back then. She wasn't laughing in the third week, standing at the kitchen sink, listening to Gregory hum in the shower upstairs, a song she didn't recognize, one he had never hummed before. That Thursday, she found herself doing something she had never done in 16 years of marriage. She had been out anyway, she told herself, running her usual errands, the grocery store, the pharmacy, the dry cleaners, all real, all legitimate. And if the route home happened to pass within 2 blocks of a gym called Ironworks Fitness, the one 10 minutes from Gregory's office, well, that was just geography. She slowed the car as she passed the parking lot, her heart beating in a strange, high place in her chest, her eyes sweeping the rows of vehicles until she found it. His gray sedan, parked neatly under a light pole, exactly where it was supposed to be. Relief flooded her so fast it made her dizzy, and right behind the relief came a hot wave of shame. She drove home gripping the steering wheel, furious at herself. What was she doing? Checking up on her husband like some suspicious woman from a daytime movie? He was at the gym. He said he'd be at the gym, and he was at the gym, and that was the end of it. She never told him about that drive. She folded it away the same way she folded his shirts, neatly, quietly, out of sight. But that night, when Gregory came home at 8:15 with his damp hair and his easy smile, he kissed her temple and said the thing he always said now, the new sentence that had replaced the old joke about the bus. "Best decision I ever made, Cass. I should have started years ago." And as he headed up the stairs, humming that song she didn't know, Cassandra stood alone in the hallway, next to the spot where the new shoes had first appeared, and admitted something to herself for the very first time. Something small and cold and impossible to fold away. She didn't believe him. Not completely. Not anymore. She didn't say anything for 9 more days. 9 days of watching him lace up those shoes by the front door. 9 days of gym texts at 5:30 and cold dinners reheated in silence, and that unfamiliar song hummed at the top of the stairs. 9 days of telling herself that there was nothing to say, because there was nothing wrong, because a man going to the gym after work was not a reason to sit on the edge of the bed at midnight pressing her palms together like she was trying to warm them up. On the 10th day, she called her mother. Joyce Hartwell lived 20 minutes away, in the same house where Cassandra had grown up. A modest place on a tree-lined street, with a porch swing that had needed a new chain for 15 years, and somehow still held. Joyce was 69 years old and had outlived one husband and survived another. And she had developed, through those particular trials, the kind of calm that some people mistake for indifference, but is actually the rarest form of love. She didn't panic. She didn't catastrophize. She listened, and then she thought. And then she spoke, usually with one hand wrapped around a coffee mug and the other resting flat on the kitchen table, as if she needed to feel something solid beneath her. That Thursday, Cassandra sat across from her mother at that same kitchen table, her own mug growing cold between her fingers, and told her everything. The shoes, the text message, the damp hair, and the new gym bag, and the water bottle, and the humming. She said it all plainly, without embellishment, because she knew her mother would see through embellishment the way she saw through most things. Joyce listened all the way to the end without interrupting. Then she lifted her coffee, took a slow sip, and set it back down. "Well," she said, "maybe he just finally decided to take care of himself." Cassandra had expected something along those lines. She had expected it, and still she felt her jaw tighten. He never felt the need to do it secretly before. "Is it secretly, or is it privately?" Joyce asked, with the gentle patience of someone who has learned the difference the hard way. "What's the difference?" "One is hiding something from you. The other is doing something for himself." She tilted her head slightly. "Gregory has always been the kind of man who announces things after the fact, not before. Remember when he repainted the garage? You woke up one Saturday and it was already half done." This is different." "How?" Cassandra opened her mouth and then closed it again, because the honest answer was that she wasn't sure how it was different, only that it felt different, in a place below logic, below the reach of her mother's reasonable questions. "He's happier when he comes home," she said finally, and she heard it land differently than she meant it. Not like a woman reporting something good about her husband, but like a woman reporting something suspicious. Her mother heard it too. She reached across the table and touched Cassandra's hand once, briefly, the way she had done since Cassandra was small. "Then maybe that's the whole story, sweetheart. A man got off the couch, and it's making him feel better. That's a good thing." Cassandra drove home that afternoon with her mother's voice still in her ear. A man got off the couch. Maybe that was the whole story. Maybe the shoes and the gym bag and the water bottle and the song were exactly what they appeared to be. And she was sitting in the dark, constructing shadows out of ordinary light. She decided to talk to him that night, not to confront. That word was too heavy for what she was feeling, still too small and unprovable to carry that kind of weight. Just to ask, just to include herself, to stop being a woman who drove past parking lots and pressed her palms together at midnight. Gregory came home at 8, later than usual, even for a gym night. His hair was damp, as always. His gym bag landed at the bottom of the stairs with a familiar thud. She had left dinner warm this time, and he sat down at the kitchen table with the gratitude of a man who had genuinely earned his hunger. She sat across from him and waited until he had taken a few bites before she said very simply, "Can I ask you something?" He looked up. Nothing alarmed in his face, just attention. "Of course." "Why didn't you tell me? About the gym, I mean, from the beginning." He set his fork down slowly. She watched him think, watched him decide something, and then he exhaled in the way that Gregory exhaled when he was being honest rather than diplomatic. A long breath through his nose, his shoulders dropping an inch. "I wanted to surprise you," he said. "I mean that exactly the way it sounds. I didn't want to tell you I was going and then quit after 2 weeks. I've said I was going to exercise probably 40 times in our marriage, and I never did it. So I thought, let me just actually do it. Let me stick with it long enough that you can actually see it. Then you'd know I was serious." She held his gaze. "Serious about what?" "About being around. Long term." He half laughed at himself, uncomfortable in the sentiment. "Cass, I sit in front of a screen for 9 hours a day. I know what that does to a person over time. I've known for a while. I just decided it was time to actually do something about it, instead of joking about it." It was the most direct he had been with her in months about anything, and she felt the tension in her chest shift. Not dissolve. Shift. Because the explanation was good. It was exactly the kind of thing Gregory would think and do. Exactly his logic. Don't announce it. Just prove it. She nodded slowly. "Okay," she said, "but promise me you'll tell me things. Even the things you're not sure about yet." "I promise." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand once, firm and warm. "No more surprises." "Well, good surprises are still allowed." She smiled. He smiled back and picked up his fork again, and she watched him eat and thought that maybe her mother was right. Maybe it really was that simple. The next 3 weeks were the best they'd had in a long time. He texted before the gym without being asked. He came home some nights a little earlier, or called on his way back just to talk, the way they used to when they were dating, when they would stay on the phone long past the point of having anything particular to say, just to hear each other's voices. One Saturday, he suggested they try a new restaurant downtown, a small Italian place with candles on the tables that had opened a few months ago, and they sat there for 2 hours talking about nothing especially important and everything that mattered. He was present. He was warm. He was entirely himself. Cassandra exhaled. She let the last of the tightness go and decided that the thing she had felt in the hallway at midnight had been her own anxiety, not her intuition, a distinction that mattered. But the thing about calm, she had learned over 39 years, is that it never warns you when it's about to end. It didn't end all at once. It unraveled in small increments, the way a hem comes loose, one thread at a time, almost invisible, until the whole thing gives. The first thread was a Thursday in October when he came home at 9 instead of 8, with an explanation about a longer session and a new training approach. Perfectly reasonable, except that he gave it too quickly. The words already arranged before she could ask. The second thread was a weekend when he seemed to move through the house like a man somewhere else, answering her, but not quite hearing her, scrolling through his phone with a concentration she recognized from the early years of his career, back when the company was new and everything felt urgent. She mentioned it once, gently. He attributed it to a major project at work, a delivery deadline that was eating into everything. She believed him, because it was the kind of thing that happened. She went on folding his shirts. But the third thread was the one she couldn't dismiss. It was a Wednesday evening. She had been at the kitchen counter finishing a shopping list when her phone buzzed. A message from Gregory at 5:28. Heading to the gym. Home by 8. The same text she had received a dozen times, and she hadn't thought anything of it. She set her phone down, finished the list, put on a jacket, and went out to run her errands before the grocery store got crowded. She was back by 7:45, paper bags on the counter, coat still on, when she made herself a cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen table. And it was there, sitting in the quiet of the house, that she noticed it. Really noticed it. For the first time. The feeling wasn't new. It had been there for weeks, sitting beneath the good dinners and the Italian restaurant and the Saturday morning phone calls. She had been pressing it down the way you press down the lid on something that doesn't quite fit, telling herself it was sealed, telling herself it was fine. Gregory was happier at the gym than he was at home. That was the sentence she hadn't let herself finish until now. He came through the door those evenings with a glow that dimmed slightly the moment he crossed the threshold, the way a light shifts when a cloud passes over it. Not unhappy to be home. Gregory was not an unhappy man, but that specific lightness, that quiet, private smile fading from his lips. It belonged to something out there, not in here, not to her. She sat with that thought until she heard his key in the front door at 8:35, 35 minutes later than he had said, again, and listened to his gym bag land at the bottom of the stairs, and heard him call her name in that easy, cheerful voice, and she answered him from the kitchen in a voice equally easy, equally cheerful, and she thought of her mother's hands flat on the table, steady and grounded. Maybe he's just taking care of himself. Maybe. But even then, sitting across from him while he ate and talked and laughed, something in her chest had turned into a question that wouldn't stop asking itself, quiet and persistent as a dripping faucet in an empty house. What exactly was making him so happy out there? And why, in 16 years of marriage, had she never once had to wonder? She started paying attention differently. That was the only way she could describe it, even to herself. Not suspicion, not investigation, just a sharper quality of attention. The way you turn up the volume on something you weren't sure you'd heard correctly. She began noticing the small things she had been too relieved to notice during those 3 good weeks in October. The gym bag that always came home already zipped. The phone that spent more time face down on the nightstand than it used to. The way Gregory would sometimes pause mid-sentence while telling her about his day, as if checking something against an internal list before continuing. A habit so brief she might have imagined it, except that she noticed it 3 times in 1 week and then couldn't stop noticing it. She was not a jealous woman. She wanted to be clear about that, at least with herself. In 16 years, she had never once gone through Gregory's phone or questioned his late nights at the office or read anything dark into his friendships. She was not built for suspicion. She was built for trust. She had organized her entire adult life around it, around the bone-deep certainty that the man she had married was exactly who he appeared to be, which was exactly why the doubt was so disorienting. It didn't feel like paranoia. It felt like a compass behaving strangely. Not broken, just pointing somewhere unexpected. And she didn't know yet whether the compass was wrong or whether north had moved. November came in cold and gray, the kind of early winter weather that made the house feel smaller. She kept her routine: grocery runs on Tuesday mornings, dry cleaning on Thursdays, her mother's house every other week for coffee. Gregory kept his: office by 7:30, gym 3 evenings a week, home by 8 or 8:30. Damp hair, gym bag, that smile. The second time she drove past Ironworks Fitness, she had a legitimate reason. She needed to stop at the pharmacy on the same street, she told herself, which was true. She did need the pharmacy. She did stop there. She did pick up exactly what she needed. And if her car slowed as she passed the gym's parking lot on the way out, that was just the traffic light. And if her eyes found his gray sedan in its usual spot, under the light pole, that was just, well, that was just what it was. His car was there. It was always there. She drove home and unpacked the pharmacy bag and told herself to stop. But stopping required a certainty she didn't have. On the 3rd Thursday of November, a week and a half after the pharmacy, she did something she still couldn't quite justify in the clear light of reason. She had taken the car out in the evening, telling herself she needed to stop at the grocery store for a few things, which was technically true. She did need olive oil and she was nearly out of coffee. But instead of going directly to the store, she found herself at 6:45 in the evening, parked on the street half a block from the gym entrance, with the engine off and her hands in her lap and the olive oil unsought and the coffee unmissed. She waited. She told herself she would only stay 10 minutes. She stayed 40. At 7:32, Gregory came out through the glass front doors. He was wearing his gray hoodie, his gym bag over one shoulder, and he was not alone. He was walking beside a woman, tall, athletic, wearing the fitted black uniform of a gym employee, her blonde hair pulled back in a high ponytail. They were talking. Not the sidelong professional conversation of trainer and client, but forward-facing, animated, something one of them had said, making the other one laugh. Gregory laughed too, and Cassandra had not seen him throw his head back like that in longer than she could measure. They walked to the parking lot together and stopped at the row nearest the entrance. The woman said something else, gesturing with one hand. Gregory nodded, hands in the pocket of his hoodie, smiling still. It lasted less than 3 minutes. Then he gave a brief wave and headed toward his car. And the woman watched him go for just a moment. Cassandra was sure of it, just a moment, before turning and walking back inside. 3 minutes. She repeated that to herself on the drive to the grocery store. 3 minutes of completely visible conversation in a parking lot. Gregory had not touched the woman, had not lingered, had done nothing you could photograph and attach a caption to. And yet, she bought the olive oil. She stood in the coffee aisle for a full 2 minutes without seeing the labels. The following week was the week she tried a different approach. If watching from the outside gave her nothing, then maybe the answer was closer. She started creating small tests. She recognized them for what they were, even as she deployed them, felt faintly ashamed of each one. Did them anyway. She mentioned casually at dinner that she was thinking of joining a gym herself, just to see what he said. He said that was a great idea, and suggested the place on the other side of town that her friend Dana had mentioned once, rather than Ironworks. She noted that. She asked once, offhandedly, if he had made any friends at the gym, and he said a couple of guys from the office came on Tuesdays, Marcus, the fish microwaver included, which made her laugh despite herself, but he said it easily, without the careful arrangement of words she had been listening for. She also, and she was least proud of this, pulled back. She answered him in shorter sentences, went to bed before he came home on a gym night, leaving a covered plate on the counter so that she could lie in the dark and listen to the sounds he made moving through the house. How long in the kitchen? How long on the couch? When the creak of the stairs? How long in the bathroom? She told herself she was gathering information. She knew she was really testing whether he would notice the distance, whether it would matter to him. He noticed on the second night. He came into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and said, quietly, "Cass, you awake?" She said she was just tired. He said, "Okay." He sat there another moment, and she could feel him thinking, and then he said, "You'd tell me if something was wrong, right?" She almost said it then, almost rolled over and turned on the lamp and said, "Tell me about the woman in the parking lot. Tell me why you're happier on the way home than you are when you arrive. Tell me what you're not telling me." Instead, she said, "I'm fine. Go to sleep." And he did, eventually. And she lay there in the dark, with all of it pressing on her chest, knowing she had missed a door that might not open the same way again. December arrived. The days shortened and the house filled up with the smell of the candles she burned in the afternoons, vanilla and cedar, the same ones every winter, a ritual so automatic she barely noticed it anymore. Gregory brought home a small poinsettia from the grocery store and set it on the kitchen windowsill next to her rosemary pot, the way he did every year, the way he had done since their first December in this house. When they were so new to it, they still got lost looking for the light switches. She had smiled at it then, and she smiled at it now. And the smile was real, and she hated how real it was, because it made everything harder. One afternoon, a Thursday, 9 days into December, she found herself in the kitchen searching for her wallet. She had already checked her purse twice, the counter, the little bowl by the front door where they kept their keys and loose change. It occurred to her, with mild irritation, that she might have left it in the car. She remembered paying for gas 2 days ago, remembered the wallet in her hand, and couldn't remember putting it back in her purse afterward. Gregory had taken her car that morning. His was at the mechanic's for the day, a routine checkup, and she had told him to take hers since she hadn't planned to go anywhere until afternoon. He was at the office. She needed her wallet. She had 2 stops to make before 3 o'clock. the dry cleaners, and the pharmacy again. She could have called him, but he was likely in a meeting, and it seemed easier to just go by ironworks on her way. He had mentioned once that on Tuesdays and Thursdays he left the car in the lot all day if his meetings ran late, walking the 6 blocks to the gym directly from the office and picking the car up after. She knew the lot. She knew where he parked. She drove over in his gray sedan, which she had borrowed for the afternoon, and pulled into Ironworks lot at 2:47. Her car was there, the white one, 2 rows from the entrance, just where she expected it. She got out, walked over, tried the door, and it opened. The wallet was on the passenger seat, exactly as she'd thought. She picked it up, turned to go. And that was when she saw them. Gregory was there, through the wide front window of the gym, visible from the parking lot in the afternoon light, standing near the reception area, and beside him was the woman. The same blonde ponytail, the same black uniform. They were not simply talking this time. The woman had one hand on Gregory's arm, and he was leaning slightly toward her. And whatever she was saying to him, he was listening with his full attention, his body angled in her direction in a way that Cassandra recognized the way she recognized his sleeping face in the dark. She did not think about what she did next. Her phone was in her hand before she knew she'd reached for it. She raised it, aimed it through the glass, and took the picture. Then she stood in that parking lot, her own wallet in her hand, her husband's car keys in the other, and looked at the image on her screen for a long time. Her hands were not shaking. That was the thing that surprised her most. They were completely, utterly still. She sat in his car for 4 minutes before she started the engine. The photo was still on her phone screen, and she kept looking at it the way you look at something you want to be wrong about, turning it slightly, as if a different angle might change what it shows, might rearrange the woman's hand on Gregory's arm into something innocent, might push his body back to a more neutral angle, might make the whole thing add up to something she could fold away, like she had folded everything else. It didn't change. It was exactly what it was. She drove to her mother's house. She didn't plan to. She had 2 stops to make, the dry cleaners and the pharmacy, and neither of them were on the way to the tree-lined street where Joyce Hartwell kept her porch swing and her coffee and her hands flat on the table. But Cassandra's hands drove her there anyway, the way the body sometimes knows where it needs to go before the mind catches up. And when she pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine, she sat there for another long moment before she was able to move. Her mother opened the door before she knocked. Mothers do that. Sense something crossing the threshold before it arrives. Joyce took one look at her daughter's face and stepped back to let her in without a word, the way she had been letting Cassandra in through difficult moments since Cassandra was 7 years old and had fallen off the neighbor's fence. They sat at the kitchen table. The coffee was already made, as if it had been waiting. Cassandra set her phone on the table between them and slid it toward her mother without speaking. Joyce looked at the photo for a long time. She picked up her mug. She set it down. "Who is she?" she asked. "I think she works there. Some kind of trainer." Cassandra's voice was level. She had cried in the car on the way over, and there were no more tears immediately available, which made everything feel strangely clear and cold, like the air after a storm. "I've seen her before, in the parking lot, talking to him. This one picture, Mom." "I'm not dismissing it," Joyce said carefully. "I'm asking you what you actually know, versus what you're afraid of." "I know she had her hand on his arm." Cassandra pulled the phone back. "I know he was leaning into her. I know that for 6 weeks I have watched my husband come through that door happier than he's been in years, and it is not because of the rowing machine." Her mother was quiet for a moment. Outside, the wind moved through the bare tree in the front yard, the one that still had 3 stubborn leaves clinging to the highest branch, refusing to let go despite everything November had thrown at them. "Have you talked to him?" Joyce asked. "I talked to him in October. He promised to be more open." "That was October. This is now." Her mother met her eyes. "Cassandra, whatever is in that photo, and whatever it means, you need to hear it from him, not from a picture through a window. And what if I hear something I can't unhear?" "Then you'll know," her mother said simply. "And knowing is always better than the in-between place you've been living in." Cassandra drove home at 4:30 with her dry cleaning uncollected and her pharmacy run unmade. She sat in the kitchen and drank a glass of water at the counter and watched the clock and waited. The rosemary was still on the windowsill. The poinsettia was still red. Everything in the house was exactly where it belonged. Gregory came home at 8:20. She heard the key in the lock, the familiar thud of the gym bag, the slight exhale of a man releasing the day from his shoulders. "Hey," he called. "Smells good in here. Did you cook?" "Pasta," she said. "It's on the stove." He came into the kitchen still in his jacket, and she was standing at the counter facing him, and something in her stillness made him stop. He looked at her the way you look at a room when you can feel that something has been moved, even before you can identify what. "You okay?" he asked. She picked up her phone from the counter. She turned its screen out and held it toward him. The change in his face was not the change she had feared most. Not guilt collapsing into confession, not the expression of a man caught in something catastrophic. It was something stranger. It was surprise, followed almost immediately by a kind of frustrated recognition, as if something he had been carefully managing had just slipped out of his hands. "Where did you get that?" he said. Not a question. The sentence had no rise in it, no inflection, just a flat statement dressed up as a question. "My wallet was in the car. Your car was at the mechanic's. I went to pick it up from the lot. You went to the gym. I went to the parking lot. My car was there. And so were you." She kept her voice steady. "Gregory, who is she?" "She's a trainer at the gym. That's it." "That's it?" "Yes, that's it." He set his jacket down on the back of the kitchen chair, slowly, the way you do when you are buying yourself time. "Cass, you're looking at 3 seconds of something you don't have context for. So give me context." "She was telling me about a change in the schedule. That's what you photographed." He rubbed the back of his neck. "How long have you been going to the parking lot?" The question landed the way he meant it to, like a redirect. A spotlight swung back in her direction. She felt the heat rise in her face. "Don't do that," she said. "I'm asking a real question. Have you been following me?" "Have I been—" She stopped herself. She breathed. "I drove past once in October. I picked up my wallet today. That is not following you. And the photo? That's not following me. The photo is me standing in a parking lot I had a reason to be in, seeing my husband with a woman whose hand is on his arm, making a choice to document it so I wasn't standing here later with nothing but my memory." Her voice stayed even, and she was proud of that, even as everything else was shaking loose inside her. "Gregory, I have been patient. I have waited and trusted and talked to you and listened to your explanations and gone back to trusting. And every time I do, something else shifts. Something else doesn't add up. So I need you to look me in the eye and tell me what's going on." He looked her in the eye. "Nothing is going on." Then why do you come home from that gym like a man who's just left the best part of his day? It landed. She saw it land. For a moment, he said nothing. And in that moment, she saw something cross his face that wasn't guilt or denial, but something more complicated and more private. Something that had nothing to do with the woman in the photo. And she was sure of it. And then it was gone, sealed back behind the expression he wore when he didn't want to discuss something. "I feel better when I exercise," he said. "That's allowed." "I'm not saying it isn't. I'm saying there's something you're not telling me, and I have been standing in this house for 3 months feeling it, and I am asking you directly to tell me what it is." "There's nothing to tell." His voice had gone to that particular flatness she recognized from their worst arguments over the years. Not coldness, but a door closing. "I'm going to the gym. I'm taking care of myself. I don't know what else you want from me. I want the truth. I'm telling you the truth. You're telling me a version of it." The argument went in circles after that, the way the worst arguments do, not building toward a point, but spiraling, picking up old grievances the way a storm picks up debris, things neither of them had meant to bring into the room. She said she felt shut out. He said he felt surveilled. She said he had made her feel that way. He said she had made it impossible to do anything without it becoming a case to investigate. She brought up October, the promise of openness. He brought up the parking lot, the photo, and she heard the anger in his voice that she recognized as the anger of someone who feels cornered. And she also heard, beneath it, something she couldn't name, something that was not quite defensiveness and not quite guilt, but somewhere in the difficult space between. "Stop with the paranoia," he said, finally, and those 4 words were the ones that ended it, because they were the wrong 4 words. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Okay," she said, very quietly. "Okay, Gregory." She walked out of the kitchen and went upstairs, and she heard him standing in the silence below her for a long time. She sat on the edge of the bed in the dark room, her side, the left side, the side she had slept on for 16 years, and stared at the floor and listened to the sounds he made in the house. He did not follow her up. After 40 minutes, she heard a different kind of movement downstairs, the slide of the hall closet, the familiar drag of a zipper, the sound of a bag being set on the floor. And then, after a brief silence, his footsteps at the bottom of the stairs, and his voice, even and careful. "I'm going to stay at my mom's for a few days," he said. "Give us both some space." She didn't answer. She didn't trust her voice to come out in any form she wanted it to. She heard the front door open. She heard it close. She heard his car start in the driveway and pull away. And then there was nothing but the sound of the house, which was considerable. The furnace ticking in the basement, the branch of the oak tree brushing the upstairs window in the December wind, the small sounds a home makes when it's keeping itself together without anyone asking it to. She sat there for a long time. At some point, she noticed that the room smelled like vanilla and cedar. Her candles from downstairs, still burning, reaching all the way up here in the quiet. She had lit them that afternoon on autopilot, the way she did every winter afternoon, not knowing she was setting the stage for this, not knowing that when he left, she would be sitting in their bedroom in the dark, breathing in the smell of her own ordinary rituals, while everything else became unrecognizable. She did not go downstairs to blow out the candles. She sat on the edge of the bed, with her hands in her lap, and she thought about the look on his face. Not when she showed him the photo, not when he said the wrong 4 words, but the moment just before. That brief, unguarded moment when something in his expression had nothing to do with her or with the woman at the gym, something private and heavy and sealed away that she hadn't been meant to see. She didn't know what it meant, but she was beginning to understand that whatever Gregory was keeping from her, it was not what she thought it was. The house learned to be quiet in a new way that week. 8 days passed. 8 days in which neither of them called and neither of them wrote, and the silence stretched between two houses on opposite sides of town like a rope pulled taut. Cassandra kept the routines because the routines were what she had. The grocery store on Tuesday, the candles in the afternoon, the rosemary watered on the windowsill next to a poinsettia she couldn't look at without her chest aching. She slept on her side of the bed and left his side untouched, the pillow exactly as it had been, and told herself that this was not the end of anything, that people took space, that space was healthy. And every night she lay in the dark and heard the absence of him in the house the way you hear a clock that has stopped. Her mother called twice. Both times Joyce asked no questions, offered no verdicts, only talked about ordinary things. The neighbor's dog, the broken chain on the porch swing, and then, at the end of the second call, said only this: "When you two are ready to talk, really talk, everything else will sort itself out." And Cassandra, go with your ears open, not just your hurt. On the 9th day, a Saturday, Gregory texted her. 4 words. "Can we talk tomorrow?" She looked at the message for 10 minutes before answering, "Yes, come home." He arrived on Sunday at 2 in the afternoon. She heard his car in the driveway, heard the engine turn off, and then a long pause, nearly a minute, before the car door opened, as if he was sitting there gathering something. When she opened the front door, he was standing on the porch of his own house like a visitor, holding not his overnight bag, but a plain manila folder. And his face was the face of a man who had not been sleeping. They sat at the kitchen table. Between them, where the photo had been 9 days earlier, he laid the folder. His hands were resting flat on top of it, and she noticed they were not steady. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to let me get all the way through it, because if I stop, I don't know if I can start again." She nodded. She did not trust herself to speak. "In August," he began, "the company brought in one of those wellness programs. Health screenings for everyone, right there in the office. Blood pressure, blood work, the whole thing. I almost didn't do it. I did it because Marcus did it, and I didn't want to be the guy who was scared of a needle." He attempted a smile that didn't hold. 2 weeks later, they called me back. My numbers were bad, Cass. Not inconvenient bad. Bad, bad. Blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, all of it. The doctor sat me down and told me that men my age, with my numbers, with 20 years of sitting in a chair for 9 hours a day. She said, if I didn't change everything, immediately, I was on a road that ends in a heart attack or a stroke. Not maybe. Probably. She said the word probably, and I heard it in her voice that she meant it. Cassandra's hands had gone cold around her coffee mug. Every word was rearranging the last 3 months of her life, piece by piece, into a completely different picture. The gym was medical, he said. Supervised. The doctor set it up. That's why it started so suddenly. That's why the schedule was so rigid. Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, structured cardio program, follow-up appointments every few weeks. That Thursday in October when I came home at 9, that wasn't a longer workout. That was a follow-up appointment after the workout. He opened the folder and began laying the papers in front of her, one by one, like a man surrendering evidence. The screening results, the lab work from September, the cardiology referral, the follow-up in November, the program schedule from the gym. It's all dated. It's all there. She looked down. The papers swam and then came into focus. His name at the top of each page, printed in the impersonal font of medical records, columns of numbers with small arrows next to them pointing the wrong direction. A physician's signature. Dates: August, September, October, November. The entire secret architecture of her husband's autumn laid out on the kitchen table between the salt and the napkin holder. "Why?" she said, and her voice cracked on the single word, and she started again. "Gregory, why wouldn't you tell me?" And here he looked down at his hands, and when he looked back up, his eyes were wet. And she had seen her husband cry exactly twice in 16 years. "Because I was terrified," he said simply. "Because saying it out loud to you made it real in a way I couldn't handle yet. Because you have taken care of me for 16 years, and I could not stand the thought of you looking at me the way you'd look at a sick man. I wanted to fix it first. I wanted to walk in here one day with good numbers and say, 'Hey, guess what, I survived.' I wanted to be past the scary part before I put the scary part in your hands." He wiped his eyes with the back of his wrist, quickly, embarrassed. "It was wrong. I know it was wrong. I knew it every single night, coming home, watching you watch me, knowing you could feel that something was off, and letting you carry that instead. I told myself I was protecting you. I was protecting myself. There's a difference, and I learned it the hard way." "And the woman?" Cassandra said quietly. "Lindsay." He nodded slowly, like a man who knew this part was owed. "She was my first trainer. The program assigned her, and a few weeks in, she made it clear she was interested in more than training. Nothing dramatic. A comment here, standing too close, the hand on the arm you photographed." He held her eyes. "I told her no, Cass. That same day, actually. I told her I was married, that I was in love with my wife, and that I needed a different trainer. What you photographed through the window was the end of something, not the middle. I switched to a new trainer the following week, a woman named Patricia. She's about 60, and she yells at me like a drill sergeant. That's why the sessions got longer in November. Different trainer, different method. I couldn't explain any of it without explaining all of it." Cassandra sat very still. She thought of the second investigation, the nights of listening from the dark bedroom, the hot shame of the parking lot, all of it circling a man who had been driving to a gym 3 nights a week to try to stay alive for her. And she thought of one afternoon in her mother's yellow kitchen, months ago now, a mug of coffee and a shrug, and a sentence offered so lightly it had floated away. Maybe he just finally decided to take care of himself. Her mother had been right the entire time, and so, in the way that mattered, had she, because something had been hidden, and she had felt it, and feeling it had nearly broken them. "I need you to hear my side too," she said, and now her own tears had arrived, unhurried and unhidden. "I followed you, more than I admitted. I drove past that gym. I sat outside it. I tested you at dinner like you were a suspect. I turned into someone I don't recognize, and I hated her. And I couldn't stop being her, because every instinct I have was telling me that my husband had a secret. And my instincts were right. I just aimed them at the wrong secret. I'm sorry, Gregory. I'm sorry I assumed the worst of you. But you handed me a silence and asked me to live in it. And I couldn't." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to apologize for the smoke. I lit the fire." They sat with all of it on the table between them, the papers, the dates, the whole mapped geography of 2 people who loved each other and had still managed to get this lost. And then Gregory reached across the table, past the folder, and turned his hand palm up. An offer rather than a claim. and Cassandra looked at it for a moment and then placed her hand in his. "No more silences," she said. "Not even the protective kind, especially not those." "No more silences," he repeated, "and no more parking lots." The laugh escaped her before she could stop it. A wet, ragged, ridiculous laugh, the first one in weeks. And he laughed too, and something in the house seemed to exhale. 3 weeks later, on a bright, cold Sunday in January, they sat in Joyce Hartwell's kitchen, the three of them around the same table where everything had been questioned and nothing had been answered. Joyce poured the coffee. Gregory, 7 pounds lighter and holding a folder of new lab results with numbers finally pointing in the right direction, told her the whole story. The screening, the fear, the secret, the trainer, the mala by the door, while Cassandra filled in her own confessions, the stakeouts, and the tests, and Joyce listened to all of it, with her hand flat on the table and her eyebrows rising steadily toward her hairline. When they finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she took a slow sip of her coffee and set the mug down. "So, let me make sure I understand," she said. "He was hiding that he was saving his own life, and you were investigating him for improving himself." She shook her head with the long-suffering serenity of mothers everywhere. "I said it in October. He's just taking care of himself. Next time, listen to your mother. It's free, and I'm right approximately half the time, which is a better average than either of you managed." And the kitchen filled with laughter. Real laughter, the kind that costs nothing and repairs everything. Gregory's head thrown back the way Cassandra had once watched through a windshield and feared belonged to someone else, and she understood now that it had belonged to her all along. Outside, the winter sun came through the window and landed on the table, on the 3 coffee mugs, on her mother's steady hands, on her husband's living, beating, stubborn heart. And Cassandra Merrill, who had spent a season learning the difference between a secret and a betrayal, held her coffee and looked at the 2 people she loved most in the world, and felt the one thing that no photograph could ever capture: the quiet, extraordinary fullness of an ordinary life, given back.